let's just talk a little bit about signal flow for a second. Because right now we are dealing with, we just recorded this MIDI data. So when I recorded that MIDI data, what's happening here is I'm hitting a key on my keyboard. That mechanical transition that's happening inside of this controller, it's converting this information to MIDI data. This mechanical, as I hit the key, that's gets converted to MIDI data. That MIDI data is routed through Ableton to this track. Now the output of this track is then routed out of my keyboard controller into my drum machine. So it's basically forming a loop. It goes from the keyboard into the computer, processed by the computer, out of the computer, back to the keyboard, and then out of this MIDI cable, which then is routed to the input, the MIDI input of my drum machine. So that's why when I hit this key, we hear these sounds. If I don't have record arm on, Ableton doesn't know where to send that data. So it's important to always have that on when we're recording. If I turn off the record arm, it's still going to play because I've got MIDI data on my track. Now, the only problem is, if I were to disconnect this drum machine and walk away, all I'm left with is the MIDI data. We wouldn't hear this. So if I turn down the volume on this drum machine and I hit play, you're not going to hear a thing. What we'd want to do eventually is to turn this MIDI data into audio, or basically record that information. MIDI is like recording a performance, how we played it, what keys we've struck at what time, how hard we've struck those keys, how long I've held those notes for. That's the information that's recorded in regards to MIDI. That's what makes it so flexible, because I can go back and change, manipulate, fix all of those mistakes that I've made, and it has nothing to do with the audio. But the next phase is to actually get this as audio onto an audio track. So the next thing I'm going to do is go up here to my audio, and I'm going to hit, it's Command R, so I can rename this, and I'm going to call this the RY30 drum. Next thing I want to make sure, because we are looking at our I/O section, we want to make sure that I have external input set, and that it's input 1 and 2, which is basically I only have 2 inputs on this, so that's what we're recording to. Next thing I want to do is hit record arm. And we shall go back to the beginning. And I'm going to hit play. Now I'm going to turn off software monitoring. And you'll notice down here where it says auto, in, and off. These are basically your monitor views. Let me see what they call it. Monitoring. So when this is active, a track's input is played through the device and heard at its output. By default, auto is on, so as soon as I record arm something, we start to hear it. If we don't have record arm on, we don't hear it. You can turn it off, or you can have it just on all the time, and that's what's happening here. I just wanted to show you, because remember I was talking about latency before. Latency is that time that it takes for the information to get through the computer and back out again to our speakers. So right now, the information is a little bit off. And I'm going to go into my preferences, and I'm actually going to make it worse. I'm going to bring the volume up a little bit. Incidentally, if you ever want to get something back to its default state, click on the parameter so it's highlighted and just hit the delete key. Or in this case, the backspace key.